Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Welcome to the Hype Show with your boy Big J all day, aka the mighty Big J. This is episode 2 of the Hype Show. I appreciate you joining in. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe this video. I know that's pretty YouTube of me, but nevertheless, I need that. It definitely helps the channel a lot. Appreciate you joining me. We have a lot to talk about, so let's definitely get into that. The NFL Week 1 has now been concluded. Week 1 is done, and I got to start where everybody else is. The New York Jets, they got the win, but they took a big loss, and that loss is quarterback Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers, 4 plays into his first drive as the quarterback for the New York Jets, and he goes down with what is being confirmed as a torn Achilles tendon in the left leg. He is definitely out for the rest of the season. Just a bummer. 4 plays in, and he is done. The quarterback going forward again, prior seasons as the case, is now Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson is going to be the quarterback going forward. And an earlier interview with Coach Robert Saleh of the New York Jets, he is saying that they are not going to pick up another veteran quarterback, and they're not going to trade for anybody. Going forward, indeed, Zach Wilson will be the quarterback for this team. Man, it's just rough. The energy coming into this game for the New York Jets was incredibly electric. I mean, he was acquired in March of this year, earlier this year. He was all over town. He was going to baseball games. He showed up to the Rangers playoff game. He was just making it known that he was there, and he was really embracing the New York City, embracing the environment, embracing other teams and the whole nine, and just really showing that he was committed. He came to camp, which he hadn't done the last couple years. I'm with the Green Bay Packers. He was just there, and he just showed that he was ready. He was kind of mentoring Zach Wilson in a sense, being in the quarterback room and just showing him what to look for, what to do. As a veteran of, he's been in the league 18 years, so you can kind of show him the ropes and kind of show him what to do. And it's just a bummer. Like, the life was just completely sucked out of that stadium last night. Just completely gone. It was like a complete 180 from how the game started. Based on the amount of time that's needed for healing and rehabilitation of an Achilles tendon, I'm no medical expert, but just based on a lot of reports and a lot of sources that I've been reading into, this could also affect his 2024 season as well, because the typical rehabilitation period and healing period, I've heard 8 months, I've heard up to 18 months. Like, again, I'm not a medical expert, but I've just heard wide ranges of how long this could take. And Rodgers turns 40 December 2nd of this year. He was born December 2nd, 1983, so he'll be 40 years old this year. Looking at it from my point of view, he's going to have to do this rehabilitation regardless, obviously, because you obviously want to walk. But to me, Aaron Rodgers doesn't seem like the type of guy that wants to go out like that. He doesn't want to be known as the guy that showed up to the Jets, 4 plays, he's done. He just doesn't seem like that type of person to me. And, Zach Wilson has already kind of shown that he can't really be that guy. They've given him a few different chances, and he's been with the team a few seasons now. It's not like he was just drafted in 2022 or even 2021. So I'm sitting back thinking to myself, do I really want to go forward with Zach Wilson again? The team seems to be going in that direction, but it's just wild to me that this happened. Like, everything was about Aaron Rodgers the last 6 months, give or take here. And to just have it just taken away in an instant, that's crazy. I mean, I know this is football. It's a very fast, very sudden, very impactful sport. It's a violent sport. Let's just be real. We look at it as entertainment, but the actual players out there, from week 1 all the way through the week 18 and beyond, they're dealing with some sort of ailment of some kind. But those guys, they go out there and that's what they love to do, so they don't complain about it. As far as the game itself, the Jets did rally in the second half and did come away with the win. To be honest with you, the Jets, again, they won the battle, but they lost the war. The final score of the game last night was the New York Jets winning in overtime, 22-16. What happened in overtime, obviously, going to overtime, each team did have a possession, and the Jets came away. Actually, I take that back. They only had the one possession. The Jets had the one possession after the field goal was kicked by the Bills to push it to overtime, and they won off of a stunning 65-yard punt return for a touchdown by undrafted rookie Xavier Gibson out of Stephen F. Austin University. He was undrafted, and he busted his butt. The coaches loved him in camp, and they kept him on the final roster. And this was definitely a great way to keep yourself on the roster, plain and simple. Yeah, so the Jets obviously moved to 1-0, and the Bills sit at 0-1. I'm looking at the statistic here, the passing statistics. Josh Allen, he did pass for 29. He had 29 of 41 for 236 yards, and he did throw his lone touchdown to Stephon Diggs. But he had 4 turnovers in total. He threw 3 interceptions, and he had a fumble. So that's 4 turnovers that he committed, and those all were his. All the turnovers on that team were his. And to be honest with you, that's pretty much what cost them the game. He was very careless. He wasn't efficient with the ball downfield. And this is despite Stephon Diggs having 10 catches and the touchdown. He had a great game himself, but it's just nuts to me. This Buffalo team was up 13-3 on this Jets team. And based on the way things were already going with Aaron Rodgers going down so early and this team kind of just doing what they could, you would think that Buffalo would win this game going away, especially when you consider them one of the top teams in the AFC. But that's nuts to me that they lost this game. And on the flip side, if you're the New York Jets, the Buffalo Bills had 4 turnovers and you only were able to win this game by 6 points. That's the impact that Aaron Rodgers would have had. Because quite frankly, if this were a situation where they were up like or they were down with Aaron Rodgers still in the lineup, they would have found a way to not only rally, but they would have won this game going away because of the way Josh Allen was playing. For example, if you're giving away the ball 4 times, that's 4 possessions that the Jets wouldn't have had. How many points would Aaron Rodgers have given you at that point? That's a really good question. And unfortunately for the Jets, they're never going to know that. I mean, Zach Wilson again has shown in the past flashes of brilliance, and he can be okay. But going forward, he was not the solution. The Aaron Rodgers was going to be a solution for at least this season and next season. Contractually, he was there this season and next season based on the way he restructured the deal. He actually gave some money back so that they could use that, and they did use that to sign Dalvin Cook a few couple weeks ago back in August. So this is just rough, you know. The crowd was very lifeless, and rightfully so. Um, Looking forward, though, if you're the New York Jets, I mean, the head coach has already stated, we're not dead by any means, and it's really bad that people are putting an obituary under our name. But let's look at their next few games here if you're the New York Jets and see how you're going to move forward here. The next 5 games here, week 2 on Sunday, September 17th at 4:25 p.m. Eastern, they're at the Dallas Cowboys. We're going to get to them in a minute, but no, that's not looking good. September 24th, week 3, 1 p.m. Eastern, they're facing a divisional foe again in New England. They're home against New England. New England looked pretty good in the loss, but again, I don't know. And then you're home again the following week, Monday Night Football, October 1st, home against Kansas City. That defense for the New York Jets was pretty great, but if you're not matching the Kansas City points, it's a wrap. It's a wrap. Week 5, they're at the Denver Broncos, October 8th, 4:25 p.m. Eastern. I'll be in the house. That game, people were looking forward to that game because a lot of the comments that Sean Payton had in regards to the offensive coordinator for the New York Jets, Nathaniel Hackett, who was the coach of the Broncos last season. People were looking forward to this game because there were a lot of comments back and forth. And if memory serves me correctly, Aaron Rodgers did say, "Keep my coach's name out of your mouth," in regards to the article that Sean Payton had done for USA Today earlier in the year. That game was supposed to have a little bit of spice to it, a little bit of sizzle, but now it's Wilson on Wilson, Zach versus Russell. Takes away a lot of the buzz surrounding that game. It'll still be a good game. Again, that's 4 weeks away, so anything could happen because again, this is football, but a lot of the sizzle in that game was because of that. And then in week 6, the week after that, they're home against the Philadelphia Eagles, October 15th, 4:25 p.m. Eastern. That's not looking good. According to a lot of the odds with this injury, the odds of the Jets winning certain games down the stretch and winning the Super Bowl overall, those odds plummeted with this injury to Aaron Rodgers. So you got to ask yourself at this point in time, based on what we are right now, we're going to want to win football games. But based on the 5 games I just gave you, they could be 1-4 in those games. So that'll put you at 2-4 for the season. They're 1-0 right now, and they had a great victory last night. But looking forward, That's rough. That's going to be a problem for this team. And I sit back and I think to myself, again, you're not bringing anybody in at quarterback. You're sticking with what you have. Is that the solution? Because last season, these guys show that they don't really believe in Zach Wilson like that. They wanted Mike White in there, if you remember correctly, and he won them some games. Mike White's now the backup for the Miami Dolphins, so you don't have that option anymore. And Joe Flacco, he was just too old. He's not that guy anymore. So it's just nuts. We'll just have to see what happens. So now let's move to the next topic here. Looking at the other standings, or actually the other results here, another result that jumped out at me here that we need to talk about: the the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas Cowboys, Sunday Night Football, stomping down the New York Giants, 40-0. 40-0. They sacked Daniel Jones 7 times. The defense went ham on that guy. Couldn't get anything going, couldn't get away from the pressure. It was just a rough night all night. Rough night all night for the New York Giants as a whole. And man, 40-0, the biggest shutout victory in Dallas Cowboys history since 1995. Guess who they beat in 1995 for now their second biggest shutout victory in Cowboys history? Yeah, the New York Giants. 35-0. Week 1. Yeah, I can't make that up. But yeah, there's really nothing much to even write about if you're the New York Giants. You just got to move on to week 2. But this game was all Dallas on all 3 phases of the ball. I mean, the offense to me was pretty solid except for Dak Prescott. But at the same time, Dak Prescott didn't really need to do much. Like, what do you need to do when the defense is spotting your points and special teams is getting it done for you? His statistics passing were 13 of 24 for 143 yards. Now, he didn't fumble or throw any interceptions, but he didn't throw any touchdowns. Didn't really have to do much. On the flip side, Daniel Jones, 15 of 28 for 104 yards, 2 picks. Not a good night. And I touched on this game earlier in the week, obviously, because we were doing predictions of how things would go. And I mentioned that the New York Giants, in my opinion, paid the wrong guy. This is another example of that. 104 yards. And this was through 3.5 quarters of football. They ended up putting Tyrod Taylor in because there was no point in keeping him in there. The rain started to pick up later in the game, and it was just done at that point. Now, as far as the Dallas Cowboys, I was speaking about their offense. The majority of their points again were on defense, but Tony Pollard was in there. He looked pretty good. 14 carries, 70 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's going to do it for you. That'll also help you as far as offense if you have a pretty good running game. The New York Giants, their running game wasn't there, and you need that to help a quarterback like Daniel Jones. You need somebody that can really run the rock and help you out when those times to kind of keep the pocket nice and solid. And at the same time, it keeps the rushing it keeps them honest. It keeps them from blitzing too much because they can throw it over the top. And if it's a situation where they kind of spread out, that gives Barkley the pockets he needs to get off. They didn't have either one of those going. Saquon Barkley had 12 carries for 51 yards, no touchdowns. Their second leading rusher was Daniel Jones. That's a problem. 13 carries, 43 yards. That's not going to help you. Looking at the receiving, that was all Dallas too. CeeDee Lamb, he had 4 catches for 77 yards. He did not have a touchdown, but at the same time, they were spotted points. He didn't really need to do that. That just keeps the chains moving. And then on the New York side, their leading receiver was Waller, their tight end, Darren Waller, 3 catches, 36 yards. That's not going to get it done. And if you look at the rest of that division with the Philadelphia Eagles and the Washington Commanders, you're already in the hole. Dallas beat you. Philadelphia beat New England. Washington beat Arizona. We'll talk about that later, those games later as well. You're already in the hole. And you could easily say that it was raining outside, but that's not an excuse. It's not like Dallas was playing in a tent. They were playing in the rain too. They just played better football. They played like they wanted it. That's what it comes down to. The New York Giants, to me, they're going to regret paying this money to Daniel Jones. $40 million a year the next 4 years. Let that sink in. Let that marinate. $40 million a year for the next 4 years. 0 points on the scoreboard. I mean, getting beat down is one thing, but to get shut out as well, that's a whole different feeling. You did nothing. The fans were disgusted. I really feel for New York football. I really do. New York football just didn't have a good week. The New York Giants, looking at their schedule, just to kind of go over what they're going to be dealing with here, they're at the Arizona Cardinals on September 17th, week 2, 4:05 Eastern. No, Arizona, they wanted to lose, so they lost. There's no way Washington really should even won that game. We'll get into that later, but Giants at Arizona. That feels a lot like a pick 'em. I'm gonna probably say that a lot because as this season goes on, there's teams that are just really close as far as how great they are, and there's teams that are really close as far as how mediocre they are, and that's what I'm dealing with here with the Cardinals and the Giants. Um, just due to the simple fact they're not gonna be in a monsoon. Give me the Giants on that game. That'll bounce them back at 1-1. And again, these games, these full slates that we got coming up on Sunday, we'll talk about these games more in depth. Week 3 for Thursday Night Football on September 21st, they're at the San Francisco Giants, 8:15 Eastern. That's not going to go very well. That's not going to go. That'll put them at 1-2. They're home 10 days later on October 2nd for it looks like Monday Night Football against the Seattle Seahawks, week 4. That one's kind of a pick 'em too. We'll talk more about that one in week 5. We're looking at the Giants at Miami, 1 p.m. Eastern, October the 8th, 6 days later. That feels like a loss. We're going to talk a lot about the Miami Dolphins and how great they looked on offense, but based on what I saw from the Giants on defense, I still think Miami is going to tune them up because Tyreek Hill is a fast individual and he catches really well. He catches in space and he catches right in the pocket, like right in a small area of space. That's going to be a problem for the Giants. So, looking at their schedule, they could be a 1-4 football team after 5 weeks. And that's not where you want to be when the other 3 teams have already won their games to start. Looking at the Dallas Cowboys, they're home next week against the New York Jets. Ooh, that's going to be a game that they'll probably win, obviously, because of the loss of Aaron Rodgers. That was a game I was really looking forward to seeing to see Aaron Rodgers and the Jets at Dallas to kind of see what he can do against that defense, more so than Daniel Jones could. And yeah, I see the Dallas Cowboys winning that game to go 2-0. Week 3, they're at Arizona, September 24th. Definitely a win. They play well in Arizona. A lot of people may not remember this, but earlier like back in the 90s, the Dallas Cowboys were a part, or I'm sorry, the Arizona Cardinals were a part of the NFC East, believe it or not. Not sure why. These people probably weren't looking at a globe when they put these divisions together. But yeah, Arizona was a part of the NFC East back in the day. And with them being in the NFC West, they don't see the Dallas Cowboys every year like they used to. But this sounds like a whooping on the Dallas Cowboys at Arizona. Week 4 is versus the New England Patriots on October 1st, 2 or 4:25 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Patriots kept it close with the Eagles, but I think that had a lot to do with a couple of things. One, there was just a lot of on offense for the Philadelphia Eagles, and they got it going in the second half, and it was rainy. I don't see that being an issue, and I think the Dallas Cowboys can get that done. Obviously, they're at home, so there's not going to be any weather to complain about. Week 5 at the San Francisco 49ers, October 8th, 8:20 Eastern, Sunday Night Football. Yes. I'm not making a prediction on that one because the 49ers, they kick some teeth in too. We're going to talk about that. But the Dallas Cowboys and the 49ers, they immediately jump out as the top teams in the NFC right off the rip. The NFC as a whole, when you look at all the teams, the 16 teams in the NFC, again, they're the only ones that jump out. The Niners and the Cowboys. The Eagles, I would put them at about third. No, the Lions and Eagles, I'll let them share that third perch, but everybody else, no clue. It's like playing Texas Hold'em with a joker. I have no idea what they're gonna do whatsoever. So this game, I'm not picking this game. The Cowboys and Niners week 5, we're gonna talk about that, and we're gonna see what these teams do. Again, prognostication is not perfection. This is how I feel right now based on what I've seen so far, and what I've seen from these other teams. I think the Cowboys will be 5-0 when they get to San Francisco, or I'm sorry, 4-0 when they get to Week 5 at San Francisco. Because as far as I'm concerned, that whooping that they gave the Giants, they got some more of that to hand out to other teams. That defense played lights out, and their special teams is pretty solid. They're very, very opportunistic, and they make the right plays. So the Dallas Cowboys, they're in good shape. The Giants, on the other hand, man, like I said, they could be a 1-4 football team after 5 weeks. After 5 weeks, it's not looking good as far as I'm concerned. For me, it's this. There's couple more things here before we wrap up on this particular topic. For me, it's this. The Dallas Cowboys, again, it's not the goal of winning games, a couple of early games, beating people up. They want to be doing this in December and January. They want to be back in the first NFC Championship game since the 95 season. Same year that they went to their last Super Bowl, Super Bowl 30. That was 27 years ago, going on 28 years ago. That's the goal. For the New York Giants, they're taking a huge step back. Huge step back. A lot of people overvalued this team because of the simple fact that they actually won a playoff game at Minnesota. But what does that even matter at this point? Moving on to another result that we need to talk about for week 1, another beatdown that I just kind of mentioned previously. The 49ers head into Pittsburgh, and they absolutely blast the Pittsburgh Steelers in a rough home debut for the team as a whole, but more specifically Kenny Pickett. 30-7, the final score. 30-7. The 49ers came in there and they showed a couple things, a few things. Obviously, I had some doubts about Brock Purdy and what that elbow would be like, but hey, he shut us all up on that one. Looking at this team, again, I put them up there with the Cowboys. The Cowboys definitely showed me something as far as their defense goes. And as far as the 49ers team, their defense is pretty good too. But that offense, they ate. Brock Purdy was 19 of 29 for 220 yards for 2 touchdowns. Kenny Pickett on the flip side, 31 of 46, threw the ball 46 times, 232 yards, and he did have a touchdown, but he also had 2 interceptions. Very costly. Um, Pittsburgh Steelers, they showed me some things that I can work with, but they showed some things that they really need to work on. The Pittsburgh Steelers defense, there's a couple things to note here. That one of them is great. Their all-pro linebacker TJ Watt, he showed us how amazing he is. He did sack Brock Purdy 3 times. He got 3 sacks in that game. But the bad news is there's reports that Cam Heyward, their defensive lineman for the Pittsburgh Steelers, they're saying he's gonna be out multiple weeks with a groin injury. This is devastating because if you remember in 2022, TJ Watt ended up being out about 8 weeks or so with a torn pectoral muscle. And now you get him back and you get him going, but you lose Cam Heyward on your line. That's a huge deal, especially again with those divisional games they still have. They haven't played in their division yet. Obviously, San Francisco is not in their division. So if you're Pittsburgh, that defense, it's going to have some problems. On the offensive side of the ball, Kenny Pickett, he struggled mightily. Their first 5 drives were on third and yardage, and he went 0 for 5 on those 5 third down opportunities he had. So he ended up having to punt the ball. That was a large part of the reason why they were able to get going on offense. They were giving the ball back to San Francisco too consistently to start the game. Looking at the rushing, another thing that aided Brock Purdy really well here, looking at San Francisco's offense, was Christian McCaffrey. He had 22 carries for 152 yards and a touchdown. He ate. He did what he does. He ran the ball. He kept that defense honest, and so they kind of had to figure out where they wanted to get things done. And another issue that they had was on the receiving for the San Francisco 49ers. Brandon Ayuk went crazy on these guys. 8 catches for 129 yards and 2 touchdowns. It was just a rough day. Rough day regarding this defense because there's a couple things to note here. When you have Chris McCaffrey chewing up yardage on the ground and you have Brandon Ayuk abusing your cornerback like that, they put Patrick Peterson on him. They didn't just put Steve Peterson on him. They put an all-pro on him. Patrick Peterson, I know he's a little older, but he's still got some ball in him. Ayuk just shook him a couple times, especially in goal-to-goal situations within the red zone, within the 5-yard line where there's smaller space to work with. He got those touchdowns. As far as the other receivers for San Francisco, Debo Samuel, he had a relatively quiet day, 5 catches for 55 yards. George Kittle, he only had 3 catches for 19 yards. He had a very quiet day, and they were thinking that he wasn't even going to play in that game, but he did tough it out and go out there. But very quiet. I mean, when you're doing what you got to do in this team, Brandon Ayuk, you would think that Pittsburgh would kind of key in on him, but that just never happened. In fact, if you're looking at the statistic here, Brock Purdy only connected with 6 different receivers. So it wasn't a situation where he was throwing it all over the field. He only connected with 5 different receivers outside of Brandon Ayuk. So for me, this San Francisco 49ers team, like I said, they're right up there at the cream of the crop. I know it's only week 1, and it's really hard to judge what a team is gonna do long term based off of 1 game, good or bad. But if you're a San Francisco 49ers fan, you have to wonder to yourself, if Brock Purdy stays healthy for that NFC Championship, would we have played the Kansas City Chiefs? Obviously, we don't have a time machine, and I'm not Marty McFly. But it just makes you wonder, and it just makes you wonder what you can really do if you can keep him healthy and just keep your team as a whole healthy. Looking at the San Francisco 49ers here heading into week 2, things, as far as I'm concerned, don't just really seem all that tough. They're at the Los Angeles Rams September 17th for the week 2 game here, 4:05 Eastern on Fox, week 2. The Rams, we're going to talk about them. We're going to talk about them a little bit later. They surprised some folks with what they did. Still think the 49ers are gonna take care of business. The only time it seems to me that the Rams had or the 49ers had any trouble with the Rams was just a couple years ago when the Rams beat them in the NFC Championship to get to the Super Bowl. Other than that, the 49ers were 5-0 prior to this meeting that we have coming up on Sunday. So when it counted, the Rams did get that Super Bowl berth a couple seasons ago, but prior to that, the 49ers were getting them home and away. I'm gonna take the Niners to win that one. Again, we're gonna talk about the Rams and how surprising their Sunday was in a good way. But the Rams, I got the 49ers kinda evening things out there. We talked about this already. Thursday night football, week 3 against the New York Giants. That's a win. Week 4, they're home 10 days later on October the 1st, 4:25 Eastern on Fox, week 4 against the Cardinals. I got them winning that one. Week 5, I already told you, I'm not predicting that one yet. That's home against the Dallas Cowboys, October 8th, 8:20 Eastern, Sunday Night Football. Not gonna be able to do it right now. As we get further and closer to that game, I have a prediction for you, but whew, that's Clash of the Titans right there. Clash of the Titans. Looking at the Pittsburgh Steelers schedule as they get into their season here the next few weeks here, they're home against the Cleveland Cavaliers. I'm sorry, Cleveland Cavaliers. They're home against the Cleveland Browns. Sunday night football. I kind of touched on this a bit a couple days ago as well. Sunday night football, home against the Cleveland Browns, 8:15 Eastern. Cleveland plays their divisional opponents tough. If you don't believe me, ask Joe Burrow. We'll talk about that game, but Cleveland, they gave it to Cincinnati. They made Joe Burrow look like Joe Nothing. They made him look like Joe Blow, and he's not by that by any means. So Cleveland, yeah, I could see that being a tough game, and I could see, I don't. We'll touch on that in a bit. Week 3, they're at the Las Vegas Raiders. Monday Night Football, September 24th, 8:20 Eastern. At the Raiders, Steelers at Raiders. The Raiders, we're gonna talk about them a little bit later with their defeat over Denver, but I still just don't know if they're any good or not. It was more a little bit of ineptitude on the Broncos' part that gave them that victory. Don't want to take anything away from them completely, but there was just a lot of things the Broncos did to give them that game. So I don't know if Vegas is any good yet. And again, after a couple weeks, we'll know who the Steelers are. So we'll talk about that at a different time here and kind of get into that predictions because I really don't know if the Raiders and Steelers are better or worse than each other at this point. Houston Texans are at the Houston Texans October 1st, 1 p.m. Eastern, CBS, week 4. I got the Steelers winning that game. They're at Houston. I would still take the Steelers to win that game. A lot of young pieces in Houston. They just show that they're really not going to be ready this year, and they're probably going to need more players and get some high picks coming up as a result. And week 5, Baltimore, home against Baltimore, 1 p.m. Eastern, October 8th, week 5. Home against Baltimore. That's a slugfest waiting to happen. But Baltimore was very underwhelming. They got the victory, but something was very underwhelming about the Baltimore Ravens against the Houston Texans. Tentatively speaking, I would say the Pittsburgh Steelers get that done. They have Lamar Jackson at quarterback, but something just felt very blah about his performance. We'll get into that at a later time here, but getting back to the San Francisco and Pittsburgh, it just feels like opposite directions right now. 49ers are heading to the cream of the crop in their conference, and Pittsburgh is they're just fighting to survive. Biggest blowout home loss in Mike Tomlin's era as the head coach of this football team. That tells you everything you need to know because Mike Tomlin is an incredible coach. I would run through a wall for Mike Tomlin, and I don't play football. But something about the way that he coaches his team and something about the way that he keeps his team motivated, I really enjoy. It just didn't show. So I know he's seething. I know this team as a whole is seething. You're going to lose Heyward on defense, so that's going to put a little bit of a damper on your pass rush. But that schedule keeps going. Y'all got 16 games, just like everybody else. Y'all got to get out there and get it done. We'll talk more about these teams and the paths that they take as they head down the roads that they're taking and head down their schedules. But again, two different directions. It feels like the 49ers are soaring to the top, and the Steelers, they got to head on to the factory and get some more parts and get this thing figured out. So, we'll talk more about the Steelers, talk more about the Niners, and kind of just see where their schedules shake out. And the next game I want to talk about here is a Battle of Ohio. The Battle of Ohio. The Browns, the Cleveland Browns, the team I just touched on briefly, they bashed the lifeless Cincinnati Browns. 24-3 was the final score here. Cleveland, they just show a couple things to me that I just did not know. That pass rush, number one, it's fantastic. And number 2, if you go back and kinda look at the history of Joe Burrow since he's been with that team in 2020, since he was drafted in 2020, excuse me, they give that man problems. They see him twice a year, so they have plenty of film on him. It's just natural for teams in their division to have more film on the quarterback. And it just seemed like just Cleveland just had everything on what Burrow likes to do. Also, keep in mind here, he didn't really practice very much because of the calf issues that he was dealing with. So I think a lot of that may have played into it. He just looked very rusty. He just wasn't hitting chase down the field in the way he normally does. And it just showed in their preparation. Like if you're Cincinnati, there's a lot to watch, but at the same time, you want to throw this one in the trash. On offense, let's look at the passing here because as far as I'm concerned, that wasn't what did it for the Cleveland Browns. Deshaun Watson, he was barely above 50% completion. 16 of 29 for 154 yards. He had a touchdown and an interception. Joe Burrow for Cincinnati, 14 of 31 for 82 yards. Man, that's rough. That's what I'm saying. 82 yards. That sounds like a quarter worth of stats. That was the game for Joe Burrow. It was just a rough day. Cleveland, they got their 100-yard game from Nick Chubb. He does what he does. 18 carries for 106 yards. Deshaun Watson, he got to go in a little bit on the ground. That's another aspect that I didn't really see much of in 2022. And I'm sure that was a lot of what Cleveland was counting on. He showed that early. 5 carries for 45 yards and a touchdown. So overall, Watson did have 2 touchdowns, one on the ground, one through the air. That's the type of stuff that really kinda shows you his versatility, and that's definitely gonna help them, but 154 yards, you gotta step that up. Jerome Ford, he's now the backup to Chubb. He had 15 carries for 36 yards. He's essentially taking over for Kareem Hunt, who was in that position the past few seasons, currently a free agent. He's not with anybody at the moment. As far as the receiving, Cleveland, the newly acquired Elijah Moore from the Jets, he had 3 catches for 43 yards. Amari Cooper, 3 catches for 37 yards, and Nick Chubb, he also added there with 4 catches for 21 yards. Yeah, the versatility was there as far as Cleveland on offense, but it just wasn't a lot. It wasn't really that enough that they had to do that on offense because again, this was more of a defensive victory. With Joe Mixon, they held him to only 13 carries for 56 yards. There just wasn't much for Joe Mixon on the ground or through the air. Because looking at the receiving for Cincinnati, bad news. Your top 2 receivers didn't really do anything. T. Higgins was targeted 8 times, and he had as many catches as me. None. When you're in your free agent year of your or when you're heading towards free agency and you're in the last year of your deal, no catches doesn't get you the money you want. Your leading receiver for the Cincinnati Bengals was Hayden Hurst. 5 catches, 39 yards. Joe Mixon had 3 catches for 17 yards, but that's not what you want. Joe Burrow's QBR, again, I don't really like talking about QBR much because it doesn't really indicate whether they were great, the defense was great or not. This was real. 20.4. 20.4, that's the third lowest QBR he's had in his career. He was sacked twice as well. Again, if you're the Cincinnati Bengals, this is kind of what Pittsburgh needs to do with their game. You kind of check this film out, you look at some things, throw it in the trash. Period. That's all you can really do as far as this game goes because this game isn't truly indicative of who they are by any means. And another thing that kind of jumps out at me is Joe Burrow is not a bad quarterback. He's the highest paid player for a reason. He gets it done. He puts in that work. So looking at the schedules here really quick for these teams here, the Cincinnati Bengals, I don't see them staying bad. They're home against Baltimore and they're home against the Rams. They're home against Baltimore September 17th at 1 p.m. Eastern, week 2. That's a divisional game, but they're at home. Um, I'm gonna take Baltimore. No, we'll talk about that at a different time as we get closer to the game on Sunday here. Home against the Los Angeles Rams, 8:15 Eastern, September 25th. That's a Monday night football game. That's a rematch of Super Bowl 56. 56, yes, 56. And since they're home, I could see them taking that game. On the following Sunday, week 4, they're at Tennessee, October 1st, 1 p.m. Eastern, and they're at Arizona that following week, October 8th, 4:05 p.m. Eastern, weeks 4 and 5. The Cincinnati Bengals, I could see them of the next 4 games, I could see them being 2-2, possibly 3-1, possibly a 3-1 team. So that'll put you at 3-2 if you're the Cincinnati Bengals. The Cleveland Browns, hey, optimism is high if you're the Cleveland Browns. You start off with a win. You're at Pittsburgh, a game that I touched on briefly. That's going to be a slugfest. Week 3 against the Tennessee Titans, 1 p.m. Eastern. And then week 4 versus the Baltimore Ravens, October 1st, 1 p.m. Eastern. You're going to get your first 3 divisional matchups out the way in 4 games. If you can find a way to beat Pittsburgh, beat Tennessee, and then beat Baltimore, this is optimistic thinking if you're the Cleveland Browns, but you're going to be in a good spot. Really good spot. Now, week 5, home against the 49ers, we're getting ahead of ourselves a bit on that one. Because again, the 49ers, hey, when it comes to the NFC, they're up here as far as that conference. So that's something we'll touch on down the road. But hey man, 3-2 up your first 5 games is pretty solid. Especially if that defense is dominating the way it is. That'll give Watson time to get more acclimated. So now, as far as I'm concerned here, this season is so young, and we're just really just prognosticating, as I said, but just based off of a week here, I mean, there's teams that are going to be that look like trash that we thought were going to be amazing, and vice versa. The NFL, crazy sport, but we love it, right? Let's get to some other games here and touch on those briefly here as well. Another NFC South showdown that occurred here early on in the day in Week 1. The Atlanta Falcons at home defeated the Carolina Panthers 24-10. This was a game where definitely both quarterbacks, as I mentioned before, rookies. One of them is an actual rookie in Carolina quarterback Bryce Young, and one of them is an essential rookie in Atlanta quarterback Desmond Ridder. He was drafted in 2022, but he only played a few games down the stretch, taking over from Marcus Mariota. Desmond Ridder for Atlanta was 15 of 18 for 115 yards and a touchdown. That's very pedestrian. Bryce Young, he threw the ball 38 times, twice as many times as Ridder. 20 of 38 for 146 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Both interceptions were actually to new Falcon safety Jesse Bates III, who came over as a free agent from the Cincinnati Bengals. Um, Carr was having trouble. I'm sorry, Young was definitely having trouble as far as his reads. He threw a lot of short routes, a lot of dink and dunk. he connected with 8 different receivers, but, looking at the statistics as far as the receiving yards here, your best receivers were gonna be your tight end, Hayden Hurst, 5 catches, 41 yards, and then your running back, newly acquired Miles Sanders, 4 catches, 26 yards. They traded DJ Moore away, and your receiving core consists of Adam Thielen, Laviska Shenault Jr. Those names don't jump out. They just don't jump out. He's gonna probably need more help with the running game and the passing game. But again, the Carolina Panthers, they had a number 1 overall pick, and even before making that trade with Chicago, they had a top 10 pick, so they're picking high. They're gonna need help for a very, very long time. So as far as I'm concerned, with the Carolina Panthers, the optimism is not gonna be high anyway because this is a rebuilding project. For the Atlanta Falcons, looking at them, Desmond Ritter, it's gonna take time with him too. He had a lot of trouble as far as his reads and looking for the right routes all day. He only connected with 4 different receivers. Looking at his receiving stats, Kyle Pitts, the tight end, this is his 3rd year out of Florida, got you 2 catches, 44 yards. Mac Hollins, he was a wide receiver that came over from the Las Vegas Raiders as a free agent. Once they acquired Jacoby Myers, they kind of left him out in the dark, so they picked him up kind of just as a backup option. He had 3 catches for 31 yards. And your rookie running back, Bijan Robinson, he definitely showed out the gate. He has a nice mix as far as the running game and the passing game. 6 catches, 27 yards, and a touchdown to go along with 10 carries for 56 yards running the football. Now, your ace of the day was Tyler Algier for the Atlanta Falcons. He had 15 carries for 75 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now, both touchdowns were definitely in the red zone. They were very close, but nevertheless, that gave them the scores that they needed to kind of help out Ritter as he was having issues with throwing the football. They kind of had to get to the running game. And on the flip side, the Carolina Panthers, their running game it was all right. It kind of had its moments where it definitely showed that it could help Bryce Young, but it needs to do it more often as he gets more acclimated to the speed of the game. Miles Sanders had 18 carries for 72 yards. And to go along with that, Chuba Hubbard had 9 carries for 60 yards. They were close to 200 yards rushing as a team, but it just didn't really make any moves for them as far as getting them down the field and as far as getting them in a prime position to score these touchdowns. Carolina and Atlanta, somebody had to win this game, unless there was a tie, of course. But these are 2 teams that are still definitely figuring it out and figuring out what they need to do as far as what they need as far as personnel and what they can do with said personnel to make themselves a winning team. The Carolina Panthers are sitting at 0-1 already. They're home against the Saints next week. That's one of the Monday Night Football games on September 18th. It's 7:15 Eastern. I believe that's the first of the 2 games. We'll definitely go over that as we go over the schedule here. Excuse me. The Saints looked very good. They won the game close against Tennessee, but Derek Carr, like I've said before, Derek Carr, he's very aggressive down the field and he makes the right throws at the right time when he needs to. So as far as I'm concerned, I can see the Saints winning that game, even though it's on the road. That would put Carolina at 0-2, and then they're at Seattle. The Seattle Seahawks, we'll talk about them in a bit. They had a very disappointing game as far as what they did against the Ram or the Seahawks there, but Carolina, against Seattle, we'll have to see about that one. Versus Minnesota, I could see them losing that game just off of the experience of Minnesota. And we'll talk about Minnesota in a little bit here as far as their results. At Detroit, I could see that as a L. So looking at Carolina, they could be a 1-5 football team, or I'm sorry, 1-4 football team through 5 weeks. As far as the Atlanta Falcons, they're home against the Green Bay Packers. Green Bay definitely showed me something, and I could see that being an L for the Falcons. At Detroit, that could be an L as well. So that would put them at 1-2. They're home against Jacksonville and home against Houston in the next 2 weeks. They're probably going to split those. I could see them losing to Jacksonville but getting by Houston. That's going to put them at 2-3 as well. So the NFC South is just a cluster, as they say. We'll get into that more as time goes on, but looking at that division, it's just not going to work. Not going to work. Somebody has to win that division, but we're just not sure who. Speaking of young teams trying to figure it out, the Jacksonville Jaguars, they pounced on a very young team in the Indianapolis Colts. 31-21 was the final. Looking at that game, we just kind of saw what we expected from Jacksonville. It did take them a little bit to get going, And on the flip side, we saw a little bit of what we expected from the Indianapolis Colts as well, a very young team. But Anthony Richardson, I dig what he's doing. As far as his passing statistics, 24 of 37 for 223 yards with a touchdown and an interception. And as far as running the ball, he had 10 carries for 40 yards and a touchdown as well. So he had one through the air and one on the ground. This is exactly why Indianapolis took him because they haven't had a quarterback back like that in a long time. And of course, with Jonathan Taylor being on the pup list for a few more games minimum, you kind of had to spell that running game a bit because outside of Richardson, your leading rusher was Deion Jackson with 13 carries for 14 yards. That's not going to work for you, obviously. So they had to kind of figure out a way to spell Taylor and give him what he needed as far as the offense goes. But man, they're really gonna need Taylor back sooner than later. I keep hearing rumors that he may stay on the pup list longer. I keep hearing rumors that they're gonna try to trade him by the October 31st deadline. It's just kind of a work in progress if you're the Indianapolis Colts. On the Jacksonville side, Trevor Lawrence doing what he does. This is his fourth season coming into the league here, his second under Doug Peterson as his coach. Had in the game plan, it fit him very well. He was actually 75% completion rate, 24 of 32, 241 yards and a touchdown. That touchdown was actually to the running back Travis Etienne Jr. That to me kind of, I'm sorry, Calvin Ridley. I apologize. That was to Calvin Ridley. Etienne had a touchdown on the ground, 18 carries for 77 yards. Trevor Lawrence, he actually had a little bit of footwork to do as well with 7 carries for 21 yards. So the running game, as far as Jacksonville, it's fair, but it's enough to really keep people honest as far as Trevor Lawrence and whether he's going to throw the ball down the field or get out of the pocket if he needs to. So they were efficient there. Calvin Ridley definitely showed out. Keep in mind that he missed 2022 with a suspension, and I'm sure he was dying to get out there and get it done. 8 catches for 101 yards and a touchdown. 5 catches for 55 yards and a touchdown for their other wide receiver, Zay Jones. And with Evan Ingram, their tight end, he had 5 catches for 49 yards. So that's the beauty about the offense that they had. And I kind of touched on that on Sunday. With this offense, between Etienne being as versatile as he is, and with you having two number one receivers and a tight end, even though Christian Kirk didn't get off, I consider him a number one, number two type receiver. You have 3 receivers you can count on, a running back and a tight end that can also block. I've seen Evan Ingram block when he wants to. It's just a matter of wanting to. This team, again, they're set up for success. The Indianapolis Colts, no, they got some flashes of brilliance from Richardson, but he's just gonna have to get acclimated to the game. He's just gonna have to get that experience. One thing to note about the Indianapolis Colts that jumped out at me on their defensive side of the football, linebacker Zaire Franklin, he led the entire league this past weekend with 18 tackles. That's silly. 18 tackles means you were all over the place. You were in the trenches, you were in the backfield, you were back in the open space where the receivers were making their catches or making their routes. Everything was done. 10 of those 18 tackles he had were solo, which is nuts to me. I'm taking a quick look at the Atlanta Falcons here excuse me, the Jacksonville Jaguars before we kind of jump into that next game that we want to talk about. Let's briefly touch on their games and also briefly touch on Indianapolis games. Indianapolis are home against the Chiefs. The Chiefs will have had 10 days between their opener and this game. I can see the Chiefs coming in there and kicking butt. The Colts are then at home against the Houston Texans week 3. I'm sorry, Jacksonville's home against the Texans week 3. Um, they'll probably win that game, Jacksonville. They'll put them at 2-1. Week 4, they're home, I should say, because they're going to be in London playing the Atlanta Falcons. And then they also have a game out of the country the following week against the Buffalo Bills. They have 2 international games in a row. That's pretty dicey. Um, those games could go either way, but I could see them beating Atlanta and I could see them beating Buffalo because Buffalo, the way Allen played with that football, that scares me. That's very careless. He, without a doubt, was the quarterback to me that jumped out as far as how bad he was because of where we hold him in regard. And then quickly looking at the Indianapolis schedule here before we jump into the next game, the Indianapolis Colts, they just got to do what they got to do. At Houston next week is a pickup. I could see them stealing that game because again, Richardson looked really good to me. So I could see them winning that game to even at 1-1. At Baltimore the following week, September 24th, 1 p.m. Eastern, week 3. That's probably an L at Baltimore. Again, Baltimore didn't jump out as amazing to me, but they got it done. And that's really all that matters. Week 4, they are at home against the Los Angeles Rams. Week 4, the Colts. Week 4, 1 p.m. Eastern, October 1st. Rams and Colts. The Rams, we're going to talk about that here in a second, but the Rams are going to probably shock people the same way Seattle did last year, just based on the way of what they did to Seattle. So I'm going to take the Rams to win that one. Week 5 at home against the Tennessee Titans. I'm actually going to take Tennessee. So that would put the Colts at 2-3. Again, we're just going to really have to look and see, man. That's just how this season goes. Switching gears here, we're going to talk about the NFC and go to a matchup here where I was wrong. I had prognosticated correctly, but was still wrong somehow. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers squeaking by the Minnesota Vikings 20-17 as Baker Mayfield throws 2 touchdowns in his first game as a Buccaneer and his first victory. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they definitely surprised me, but at the same time, Minnesota surprised me in a bad way. Baker Mayfield was 21 of 34 for 173 yards and 2 touchdowns, while Kirk Cousins, he had a pretty phenomenal game, 33 of 44 for 344 yards and 2 touchdowns with 1 interception. That's a 75% completion rate, throwing 44 passes. That's pretty solid. Justin Jefferson, he had 9 catches for 150 yards, but he unfortunately didn't find the end zone. That was a problem last season. One thing that jumped out about me as I was looking at Justin Jefferson's stats in 2022, he ate as far as his catches and he ate as far as his receiving yards, but he only had 6 touchdowns. That was very interesting to me because based on the way he was getting you those fantasy points, you would have thought he was eating more in the end zone. But again, he's 6 touchdowns in 16 games. He did miss one game at the end there. Looking at the rushing here for each team here, there wasn't really a lot to talk about as far as the ground game. Rashad White for Tampa Bay had 17 carries for 39 yards, and behind him was Tucker with 5 catches for 15 yards. Looking at Minnesota, they had 11 carries for 34 yards from Alexander Madison, who was now your number one back for Dalvin Cook. And Kirk Cousins himself was your second leading rusher at 3 carries for 7 yards. Cool. That's one thing that's really going to hurt Minnesota this year. Dalvin Cook, he was able to run the football and catch. And you're not going to have that element. Madison just doesn't scare me like Dalvin Cook did. Like, if you're being honest with yourself, he's not going to scare you like that. As far as receiving goes here, Tampa Bay, as I mentioned, they have Evans and Godwin. I mentioned that that was going to be the key for Baker Mayfield. And if he could throw it at all, they would be fine. And that turned out to be very pivotal. Mike Evans with 6 catches for 66 yards and a touchdown. Chris Godwin had 5 catches for 51 yards and a touchdown. His fifth reception and final reception of the game was very key because in a third down situation, it got Tampa that first down and allowed them to run out the clock. They had the ball for the final 5 minutes and 4 seconds of the game. So Chris Godwin was definitely a chain mover for this Tampa Bay team. And I think that really helped out Baker Mayfield a lot. As far as other receivers, I mentioned Justin Jefferson. Jordan Addison, the rookie out of USC that I mentioned a bit, 4 catches, 61 yards in his first career touchdown. And tight end TJ Hawkinson, he had 8 catches for 35 yards. Kirk Cousins, he connected with 8 different receivers for over 340 yards, but it was in a losing effort. I just don't understand what Minnesota would need to do as far as their team because again, the team is what it is, and you can't go back and get those players. But a lot of what you did last season is gone. The Minnesota Vikings next week, Thursday night football here in a couple of nights. We'll talk about that game more on Thursday. They're at Philadelphia, 8:15 Eastern here on the 14th in a couple of days. Philadelphia could put them at 0-2 because Philadelphia's defense, they still show that they can play pretty well. That's what kind of was the story against New England. The Los Angeles Chargers, they're home against them week 3. I did mention that I believe that the Chargers could go in there and steal that game, but We're gonna talk about them in a bit. The Chargers, they just find a way to drop the ball at the last second. They really do. So that game feels much more like a pick 'em than the Chargers kind of storming in there. We'll talk about that game. At Carolina, week 4, I could see Minnesota winning that game. October 1st, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Week 5, they're home against the Kansas City Chiefs, 4:25 p.m. Eastern Time, October 8th, the Week 5 game. Home against Kansas City, that means Mahomes is gonna be in a dome. I could see the Chiefs taking that one. Now, based on what I prognosticated here, I could see them 2-2 over the next 4 weeks. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, things are looking a lot brighter because of the fact that the division you're in, it's not that difficult of a division. We'll just kind of have to see because much like the AFC North, people are going to beat each other up. And B, you got that win on the road. That's always going to help. They're home against the Chicago Bears, 1 p.m. Eastern, September 17th. I could see the Bucks winning that game. Home against Philly, Monday Night Football, September 25th, or 7:15 Eastern Time, Week 3. Um, yeah, the Philadelphia Eagles travel well. I don't really worry about travel with the Eagles, and I could see them taking that. But that would put the Buccaneers at 2-1. They're at the Saints the following week. Week 4, 1 p.m. Eastern, October 1st. That game, yeah, that's one of those games where I sit back and think to myself, that feels like a pick 'em, but as we get closer to it, we'll kind of know more. And then week 5, they're home, but they're against the Detroit Pistons, October 15th. They're one of the first. I'm sorry, that's a week 6 game because week 5 they have a bye already. They're going to be one of the first teams to have a bye to start their year because week 5 is the first week that bye weeks kick in. So they'll have a week to prepare for a home game against Detroit. As we get close to that game, we're really going to have to see. Detroit so far looks great, and I just don't see anything that's going to really derail them outside of injury. That's kind of what happened with the New York Jets, and that's just how football is. Unfortunately, you just got to watch out for certain things and just hope your team can stay healthy and execute. That's really what it is. Moving on to the next game, another NFC South team getting it done. They sealed the deal late over the Tennessee Titans, 16-15. A very close game here, but for the New Orleans Saints here, when you see the Buccaneers win and you see the Falcons win, you got to keep pace, and that's exactly what they did. That's what matters the most here. That game to me was underwhelming until towards the end. Derek Carr was 23 of 33, 305 yards with 1 touchdown and 1 interception. And on the flip side for Tennessee, Ryan Tannehill, he's probably going to want to throw this film in the trash. 16 of 34, 198 yards, 3 interceptions. 3 interceptions. That's yeah. You would think that the Titans would have gotten blown out with 3 interceptions, but again, it was just very underwhelming as far as the offense on both sides of the ball. Derek Carr threw for a lot of yardage, but they just didn't hit the end zone enough, and that was pretty much what spelled what kind of kept the game close here. You got decent rushing from Jamal Williams, 18 carries, 45 yards. And in Tennessee, they got decent rushing as well, 15 carries, 63 yards from Derrick Henry. Through the air, New Orleans got 8 catches, 112 yards from all-pro wide receiver Chris Olave, but he didn't find the end zone. And actually, backup running back Rashid Shaheed, he actually had 5 catches for 89 yards and the touchdown that Derek Carr threw. Um, that'll work. Rashid Shaheed, he showed a lot of versatility, and as I always say, these running backs they don't just run the ball anymore. You got to be able to catch, you got to be able to throw. And so we saw a lot of that from Shaheed, so he should be very thankful. This is a situation where you're going to get Alvin Kamara back after 2 more games, I believe. With when you have Kamara, Williams, and Shaheed, the 3 backs doing what they do, that makes the passing game much more efficient for New Orleans, and that's going to keep these defenses honest. So if they can keep this up and get Kamara back, I could see the Saints jumping to the top of this division. Tennessee, their newly acquired wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins, in his debut for the Tennessee, he had 7 receptions for 65 yards. Didn't find the end zone, unfortunately. It was just a lot of field goals, unfortunately, for Tennessee. Derrick Henry, he actually had 2 catches for 56 yards. Now, one of those catches was about 42 yards, so, like, I mean, that's fine, but when your running back is your second best receiver, that's gonna be a problem. So, if you're the Titans, looking at the schedule here, what are you gonna do here? Because this isn't even a divisional game and you're already down. Your next opponent here is gonna be the Los Angeles Chargers, week 2, 1 PM Eastern, September 17th. At this point in time now, I could see that being an L because of the way the Chargers played, and the way the Chargers looked, even though they lost the game. We're going to talk about them in a bit here. The Chargers are still a better team to me than the Titans, even though they didn't win. The Titans are then at Cleveland, week 3, 1 p.m. Eastern, September 24th. Again, Cleveland's defense is pretty solid, and if the Saints can force Tannehill to throw 3 picks, then what is Cleveland gonna do with that pressure up front? Myles Garrett is a beast. So I could see that being another L, and then they're home against the Cincinnati Bengals. That's October 1st, 1 PM Eastern on Fox. That could be an L too. I think I touched on that game a bit earlier in the week. That could be an L too. So if you're the Titans, you're gonna be 0 and 4. I mean, again, this is prognostication, but just based on the way things are looking, your first win is going to be at Indy, October 8th, 1 p.m. Eastern, week 5. That doesn't sound good to me. Again, we'll have to see, but just looking at how things are over the next few weeks, they're going to have a tough time. The Saints should feel pretty good. They're at Carolina. That's the other Monday night football game that we're going to be talking that we talked about. That one right there, at Carolina, I could see that being a win. I could see that being a win for the Saints. September 24th, they're at Green Bay, 1 p.m. Eastern. September 24th, a Sunday game. At Green Bay, I said this already, there's no snow on the ground unless something crazy happens, but at the same time, Green Bay showed me something, on offense, so I'm gonna take the Green Bay Packers in that game. I'm actually gonna switch my pick because I did say that I think the Saints could win. I'm gonna take the Packers instead. The Packers definitely showed me more than what I thought they had. Week 4, the Saints will be at home against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 1 p.m. Eastern, October 1st. Saints and Buccaneers, divisional rival games, those things can usually go either way, and just one team is just flat out better. Um, that we'll get back to that one definitely at a particular later time here as that game gets closer. And then at the Patriots, 1 p.m. Eastern, October 8th. That's the week 5 game. I mentioned that I thought the Patriots could win that game based on their defense. As we get close to that game, I'll make a prediction, but I'm going to stick by that for now. I think I'm going to stick by that for now because the Patriots, they kept Philly close. Even though they won the game, they kept Philly close. And the way that the ball was thrown, I really enjoyed that. The way that the ball was thrown by Mac Jones once he got it together, I really enjoyed that. So we're just gonna have to see on the New England Patriots when they do the Saints do visit the Patriots. Switching gears, going to the next game, the Washington Commanders defeated the Arizona Cardinals 20-16 here as Sam Howell scrambled for a late touchdown to take and hold the lead. This game wasn't much to talk about. Both teams struggled mightily, and I just see this as a game where somebody had to win unless they tie, because that's kind of how it goes. Josh Dobbs was the quarterback for Arizona as Kyler Murray. He's not going to be available until later in the year because he's battling back from a torn ACL. He was 21 of 30 for 132 yards, no touchdowns. Sam Howell, 19 of 31 for 202 yards with a touchdown and an interception. But again, he ran the ball in to get them the victory. Not much to talk about here. He connected with 7 different receivers, as did Joshua Dobbs, but this defense for the Cardinals, that was the only thing that really jumped out at me as far as surprising. They played very well and they harassed Sam Howell until that very late moment, but you don't have an offense. You're gonna need better. Looking at this game here, it's one of those situations where the Commanders, to me, they didn't really show me anything. They just had to win. They're at Denver on Sunday, 4:25 p.m. Eastern. Um, I can see them losing that. I'm gonna still take Denver. Denver, yikes. New team, new this, new that, same results. Still taking Denver. Not sure why, but I'm gonna still take Denver. They're home against the Buffalo Bills. I still see Buffalo winning that game. They need to show me something too, but Imma still take Buffalo. That put the Commanders at 0-3. At Philly that following week, 0-4, and then home versus the Bears on Thursday Night Football, Week 5, October 5th, 8:15 Eastern Time. Bears, they need help too. We're gonna talk about them in a second, but they need help too. Um, I just don't know. These teams, there's a lot of teams where I feel very definitive about what they're gonna be, and there's a lot of teams where I'm just like, I really don't know. I'm looking at the Cardinals schedule. They are home against the New York Giants, 4:05 Eastern Time, September 17th, week 2. I'm taking the Giants, even though they looked like garbage against Dallas. Speaking of Dallas, that's the opponent for the Cardinals, week 3, 4:25 Eastern, September 24th. Taking the Dallas Cowboys without a doubt. So that would put the Cardinals at 0-3. They're at San Francisco October 1st, L. Home against the Cincinnati Bengals October 8th, L. Arizona just doesn't have anything. A lot of players left through retirement or through just free agency trades. Kyler Murray's not going to be there. Period. That's all there is to that. Speaking of the next game here, we got to take a look here. The Baltimore Ravens, they got the win, and they got some unfortunate news as well with J.K. Dobbins, the running back here. He tore his Achilles tendon. It was confirmed, and he's going to be out for the season. They did get the win over Houston 25-9, but they got some work to do. The Baltimore Ravens, this is a team I just really expected to kind of fly out, especially with Lamar Jackson signed, with the deal being done here to bring in Odell Beckham Jr. This young wide receiver though, Zay Flowers, I touched on him a little bit. Touched on him a little bit. He definitely showed up. I touched on him a little bit, and he definitely showed up here as far as what he can do. Passing yards here, CJ Stroud, the rookie from Houston, his first start, 28 of 44, 242 yards. No touchdowns, but no interceptions. Lamar Jackson was 17 of 22 for 169 yards, no touchdowns, and one interception. And before you say anything about his legs, it wasn't there either. 6 carries, 38 yards. So in total, he had 207 yards of offense running and throwing the ball. That's not going to cut it. You're playing against Houston, that's fine. Once we start getting into the thick of things, as far as the rest of your opponents in the AFC North and the other teams that are the cream of the crop in your conference, you better handle that. You better handle that. As I mentioned, J.K. Dobbins, he had 8 carries for 22 yards and a touchdown, but he's out for the rest of the season after tearing that Achilles. And the part that's even rougher for me is he's in the final year of his rookie contract, and he's going to be a free agent after this season. Is Baltimore going to want to pay this man? I highly doubt it. Zay Flowers, wide receiver for Baltimore, 9 catches, 78 yards. He didn't find the end zone, but he made some spectacular catches. I genuinely feel like he's going to end up being their number 1 receiver. Odell Beckham, very quiet, 2 catches, 37 yards. Baltimore didn't show me anything. Baltimore really did not show me anything because I expected them to beat the Texans anyway. I did call that, but it was very underwhelming. You know, the AFC North as a whole outside of Cleveland was very underwhelming this past weekend. I know it's only 1 week, so we're overreacting, underreacting, something to that nature, but just didn't move me. Baltimore is at Cincinnati on Sunday, September 17th, 1 p.m. Eastern. Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson need to show me something. It's just a matter of who. Joe Burrow's game was awful, and Lamar Jackson was just very average, very underwhelming. As far as that game goes, I'm not going to really take anybody yet. We'll talk about that as we get closer to Sunday, but it just feels like one of these teams has to win, and nobody wants to be 0-2, especially in that division. Versus the Indianapolis Colts, week 3, 1 p.m. Eastern on September 24th. They're going to win that game. I got Baltimore winning that game. At Cleveland, again, this is the same way with the Cincinnati Bengals that I feel. A divisional matchup where these teams know you best. Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Pittsburgh know Baltimore better than anybody. So at Cleveland, if their pass rush can get to Watson with Conklin being out the rest of the season, that's what they're going to need to do because Cleveland's defense is going to make life hell for Lamar Jackson. At Pittsburgh, Week 5, 1 p.m. Eastern. Baltimore, at this point, if you want to stay above water, you can at worst be 2-2 over those 4 games. At worst, because that'll put you at 3-2. The Texans, they're probably playing for another top 5 pick. They're home against Indy on Sunday, 1 p.m. Eastern, September 17th. I could see them losing that game by a field goal. They're at Jacksonville that following Sunday, September 24th, 1 p.m. Eastern. I could see them losing that game. They're home against the Pittsburgh Steelers October 1st, but as I stated earlier, I got Pittsburgh going in there and winning that game. At Atlanta, October 8th, 1 p.m. Eastern, probably an L. Even though Atlanta's not going to destroy them, we're gonna again these games we're going to talk about them a lot later, but I don't see Atlanta destroying Houston by any means because they got their own problems. So Houston could even win that game. Could be a 1-4 football team when it's all said and done, but they need pieces. Moving over to another team that showed me that I was wrong about what they would do. If you're the Green Bay Packers, no Rodgers, no problem. The Green Bay Packers, they continued their dominance over the Chicago Bears because that's just pretty much what they do. Looking at this team here, the final score, the Green Bay Packers defeated them 38-20. Love had 3 touchdowns taking over for Aaron Rodgers. He was 15 of 27 for 245 yards. Justin Fields was 24 of 37 for 216 yards. To go along with with that was a touchdown and an interception. As far as running the football, Justin Fields also had 9 carries for 59 yards, but didn't find the end zone. He was their leading rusher, as has been the case the last season and a half. With David Montgomery going over to Detroit and Khalil Herbert becoming the new starting running back, I knew that that was going to happen. David Montgomery is very versatile at catching the ball and running the ball, as you might have seen with the Kansas City-Detroit game last week. The leading rusher for Green Bay was Aaron Jones, which is typical. He had 9 carries for 41 yards and a touchdown. And through the air, he also had 2 catches for 86 yards and a touchdown. That's what Aaron Rodgers does for you. So looking at Green Bay, I'm just more interested in what they're going to do in the future. Looking at Chicago, Fields, he still has a tendency to want to run with the ball as opposed to making all of his reads first and then running with the ball. So that's something he's definitely going to need to work on. And as far as his chemistry with DJ Moore, that just was not there. DJ Moore only had 2 catches for 25 yards. So you're gonna want to work on that. I know you acquired DJ Moore and some picks from Carolina to trade that number 1 pick away, but that chemistry has to develop if you're going to be anything within that conference, within that division or the conference. But for me, the Bears are still the worst team in the NFC North. I know the Vikings didn't get the win, and we saw what Detroit could do. Green Bay, they kicked him in the teeth. Aaron Rodgers, I used to think it was Aaron Rodgers kicking him in the teeth. Nah, that's just the dynamic they have. Looking at the Chicago Bears, next week they're at Tampa on 1 p.m. Eastern, September 17th. That could be an L. At Kansas City the following week, 4:25 p.m. Eastern, the 24th. That's an L for sure. Denver Broncos, they're home against the Denver Broncos, 1 p.m. Eastern, October 1st. I hate to say this, but we're gonna talk about this game later. I hate to say this, but I've seen Denver blow so many of these games. I've seen this way too many times where they're like the Bears are like, oh, the Bears are showing up. It's not that. It's just some sort of dynamic where the Broncos just lose games like this. It's in a few weeks, so we'll talk about it. But I could see their first win possibly being there, possibly. Week 5, they turn around that Thursday night and they're at the Washington Commanders. That's a 4-day turnaround after hosting the Denver Broncos on October the 5th, 8:15 p.m. Eastern. Washington didn't show me much as far as their whole team, but they're still trying to get it together. That's definitely a pick 'em. We'll definitely talk about that game at a later time. But overall, here, Green Bay, they proved me wrong, and the Bears, they proved me right. The Eagles, they flew by the Pats despite Mac Jones throwing 2 touchdowns in the second quarter to kind of keep things close. The Eagles did pull away in the end, and they just took the game from them in Foxborough. Final score on that game here was 25-20. Jalen Hurts, 22 of 33 for 170 yards and a touchdown. Mac Jones, 35 of 54 for 316 yards, 3 touchdowns. He did have the one pick. The New England Patriots, to me, um, the defense definitely harassed Jalen Hurts and made it to a situation where he was just kind of herky jerky, and he did lose a fumble. And on the flip side, Mac Jones, this was very interesting to me. He connected with 8 different receivers, and 6 of them had 4 or more receptions. This is the offense that they wanted 2 years ago, and they definitely weren't going to have last season. With Bill O'Brien coming back, that really definitely changed the dynamic of this football team. Looking at the New England Patriots here, their next couple of games here that they have, they're home against the Dolphins for Sunday Night Football, and they're at the New York Jets. I say they lose to the Dolphins and they beat the Jets week 3. Week 3 is going to be rough on the Jets because that defense is going to harass Zach Wilson. At the Cowboys week 4, October 1st, I see them losing that game. And then week 5 against the Saints, I'm actually going to take, let me see. I'm going to stick with the Patriots. And I touched on the Saints earlier. I'm going to stick with the Patriots on that game. The Philadelphia Eagles, to me, they just need to keep pace with the Cowboys. The Giants and Commanders are not going to be a factor. Home against the Minnesota Vikings here for Thursday Night Football, so just in a couple days. I'm going to take them to win that football game. They're at Tampa 11 days later for Monday Night Football, so they're going to have 11 days between games. At Tampa, at Tampa, at Tampa. I'm going to take them to win that game as well. So that'll put them at 3-0. Home against Washington on the 1st of October, 4-0. At the Rams, 5-0. I mentioned cross country travel all the time. Not going to be much of a factor for this game. So the Philadelphia Eagles, there was a lot of worry about all the changes as far as the coaching. You got Jalen Hurts. You have a defense that knows how to make people rush the ball into places that they shouldn't, throw the ball places they shouldn't, throw the ball out of bounds. Philadelphia is going to be fine. New England, not sure. They're a mixed bag, and they're in a division that's filled with uncertainty. The only team in that division that I know is going to do things is the team I'm about to talk about right now, the Miami Dolphins. Oh boy, the Miami Dolphins. Well, this team right here is probably going to take that division. I'm making an early prediction on that, but I feel like Miami can take that division, the AFC East, because the way Buffalo looked, the Jets losing Aaron Rodgers, and New England kind of a mixed bag wouldn't shock me. Tua Tagovailoa, he went off 28 of 45 for 466 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. Justin Herbert, conversely, was 23 of 33 for 228 yards with a touchdown, and he also had a rushing touchdown to go with it. Tyreek Hill from Miami was easily the best wide receiver of the week. 11 catches, 215 yards, 2 touchdowns. Their next receiver was Jalen Waddle with 4 catches for 78 yards, no touchdowns. But when Tyreek Hill is eating that secondary like that, you don't really need to get it to Waddle like that. Can they carry forward with that plan? Probably not. That's not something Miami could do long term. But for that day, they handle business. Justin Herbert didn't play bad. He was just easily overshadowed by Tua. I mean, Tyreek Hill had as many receiving yards as almost had as many receiving yards as Justin had passing yards. Brandon Staley, I feel like he's on the hottest hot seat of coaches because this game brings back memories of that wild card game where you were up 30-0 on Jacksonville and couldn't close the deal. This game to me is a precursor of stuff that's going to happen. And if Staley doesn't get that together, he's going to be gone after the season. I don't like seeing people getting fired, and I don't wish that on anybody. But if he does not get that together, I could see the Los Angeles Chargers finding a new coach because he's supposed to be a defensive specialist, and it just didn't show. Like I said, back to the Dolphins. Like I said, they jumped out the most to me in that AFC East. The Bills lost. The Jets lose Aaron Rodgers for the season. And New England, I don't know what they are yet. We'll find out with Sunday Night Football because that's where the Miami Dolphins will be is the New England Patriots, September 17th for that Week 2 game, 8:20 p.m. Eastern on NBC. I could see Bill Belichick having a better defensive scheme against Tua. They have film. They had film already, but now they have fresh film. Give me the Dolphins close. The Miami Dolphins are then home against the Denver Broncos, 1 p.m. Eastern, September 24th. I'm taking the Dolphins, unfortunately. Sorry, Broncos. I got to take the Dolphins because if your secondary is going to have problems with Devontae Adams and have problems with just various people in the second, if you're going to have problems with various people in the receiving cores of the Las Vegas Raiders, excuse me, the Miami Dolphins are definitely going to scheme you up because as far as I'm concerned, Jacoby Myers is all right. I would take Jalen Waddle as a number 2 receiver over Jacoby Myers. And Jacoby Myers got a couple touchdowns week 1. So give me the Dolphins. They're at Buffalo. I'm going to take the Miami Dolphins because remember that wild card game, Miami played Buffalo close with Skylar Thompson last season. Not Tua, not even Teddy Bridgewater, who was still with the team at that time. Skylar Thompson, the third string quarterback. So I'm taking the Dolphins. And then home against the New York Giants, I'm taking the Dolphins. Again, this prognostication is not perfection, but as far as I'm concerned, the Miami Dolphins could be a 5-0 at worst 4-1 football team through 5 weeks. The Los Angeles Chargers, that game was at home. Miami came to your crib and they put their feet on your table and they ate all your Funyuns. I don't even like Funyuns. The Los Angeles Chargers are at the Tennessee Titans week 2. I think they can win that game. I said earlier in the week that I think they could take that game, but because Ryan Tannehill, he was bad. And the Los Angeles Chargers have a solid secondary. I'm going to take the Chargers to bounce back and win at Tennessee. At Minnesota, I'm going to take them as well, week 3, 1 p.m. Eastern, September 24th. Week 4 is where things get interesting because they're home against the Las Vegas Raiders, October 1st, 4:05 p.m. Eastern. That's their first divisional matchup of the season, so that's pretty crucial. And I genuinely can call that a toss-up right now because even though the Raiders won, I said this already, there's a lot of stuff the Broncos did to kind of give them that game. And on the flip side, the Los Angeles Chargers, there's some things that they did to give away that game. So that's a pick 'em for now. Home against the Dallas Cowboys after their week 5 bye, week 6, October 16th, 8:15 p.m. That's Monday Night Football. Taking the Cowboys. Taking the Cowboys. So as far as the Los Angeles Chargers and as far as the Miami Dolphins are concerned here, 2 different paths, like I was mentioning earlier in the program. But as far as Los Angeles' path, it's a bit more muddled. But Miami, they're in the mix right now. Another divisional matchup, the Los Angeles Rams, they bashed into Seattle with a very shocking road win over the Seattle Seahawks. That game, I was way off. I said that the Los Angeles Rams didn't have anybody and they were just going to go up to Seattle and get kicked. Definitely was wrong about that one. That was one of those games where I sat back and thought to myself, what are the Rams going to be? Who's going to step up? And they had guys step up in a huge way. The final score was 30-13. The Rams over Seattle in their house at Lumen Field. The running game for Los Angeles, Kyron Williams had 15 carries for 52 yards, 2 touchdowns. Cam Akers, he had 22 carries, but he only got 29 yards, but he did get the touchdown. So you got 3 touchdowns from your running situation, your rushing situation that you have with the Rams. That's pretty solid. The thing that jumped out at me is this. Check out these receiving stats. The Los Angeles Rams, Tutu Atwell, had 6 catches for 119 yards, and Paka Nakua, I don't know if I'm saying that right, he had 10 catches for 119 yards. Now, they didn't find the end zone, but those catches were enough to keep the chains moving for the Rams. Seattle, rough. Geno Smith was 16 of 26 for 112 yards, 1 touchdown. He did get a touchdown to Metcalf, but it was just in garbage time. It didn't matter. Stafford was 24 of 38 for 334 yards. And I think for me, the one thing that also jumps out is this. We said that Seattle would be pretty solid based off of what we saw last season. And as far as the Rams go, we said that they would be trash. Not the case. Couple more things to note here before we get to the final game of the week 1 here. The Rams, Cooper Kupp is not expected to be back for 3 more games. Those games are going to include versus the 49ers here on September 17th, 4:05 p.m. Eastern, week 2. Week 3, they're at the Cincinnati Bengals for Monday Night Football. I don't see them beating the 49ers, but at the Rams, or I'm sorry, at the Bengals, that's a situation where they could take that game. The Indianapolis Colts week 4, I could see them taking that game too, even though they're on the road. Week 5 is where they'll probably lose at home against the Philadelphia Eagles. So if you're the Rams at 3-2, you're still in the mix. You know what I mean? The Seattle Seahawks on the flip side here, they were a wild card team last year behind the 49ers. So at this current time here, I just don't know if they can maintain that. They're at Detroit week 2. That sounds like a loss. Week 3, they're home against the Carolina Panthers. And because of that cross country travel, I keep mentioning that. I'm going to take them to win that. And plus the young pieces that Carolina has as well. Week 4, they're at the New York Giants, Monday Night Football. I could see them winning that, and then at Cincinnati, week 5, October 15th, or actually week 6 because they have the bye week 5. So it's week 6, October 15th, 1 p.m. Eastern. I'm gonna take the Bengals in the meantime. I'm gonna take the Bengals in the meantime just due to the simple fact that they're at home. But again, this prognostication is not gonna be perfect, and we're just gonna have to wait and see how things go. The final game that we're going to talk about here to wrap up week 1 is the Las Vegas Raiders defeating the Denver Broncos 17-16 in Denver. Jimmy Garoppolo for the Las Vegas Raiders was 20 of 26 for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns, both to Jacoby Myers. He did throw an interception, and that was actually in the end zone to Kareem Jackson. So that actually took a touchdown off the board for them. Russell Wilson was effective. He wasn't great, but he wasn't terrible. 27 of 34, 177 yards, 2 touchdowns. The issue here for me, if you're the Denver Broncos, wasn't Russ. He didn't look bad, especially considering he was down 3 wide receivers. Tim Patrick is going to miss the season. He tore an Achilles. KJ Hamler's no longer even on the roster. He's dealing with a heart condition, a minor heart condition where he's taking medication. And Jerry Jeudy, of course, having the hamstring injury, he was out. The issue for the Broncos was special teams because that defense showed up. Newly acquired Broncos kicker Will Lutz missed an extra point, and he also missed a 50-plus yard field goal. He hasn't been right since he got injured with the Saints because he usually makes those field goals. That used to be his bread and butter all day long. So as I sit here and look at the Denver Broncos, again, there was a lot of changes with this team, but it just feels like more of the same. Week 1, 2022, you lost by a point. This week 1 in 2023, you lost by a point. The only thing that felt different was nothing. So with the Denver Broncos, I'm just kind of stuck on how I feel. And that's a terrible position to be in. The only saving grace right now is the Jets. They may not make the playoffs, so you'll still have the second longest playoff drought? Who cares about that? Looking at the Broncos' schedule, their next few games here, they're home against the Commanders week 2. I'm going to take them to win that football game. I don't know why, but I'm going to take them to win that football game. At Miami, at Chicago. So they're at Miami week 3, 1 p.m. Eastern. They're at Chicago week 4, 1 p.m. Eastern as well. I'm taking the Dolphins to win that game, so that would put them at 1-2. I said that they find a way to lose those games when we were talking about the Bears earlier. But just because of faith, I'm going to take them to win that game. I'm going to actually solidify and say the Broncos. Home against the Jets week 5, they're going to win that game now. Because if you remember week 1, I wasn't sure because of the Aaron Rodgers factor. That's out the window. So I got the Broncos winning that game to put themselves at 3-2. And finally, looking at the Raiders schedule here before we close things out here. Looking at the Raiders, they're at Buffalo week 2, 1 p.m. Eastern. Buffalo has a nasty taste in their mouth. So I see them winning that football game. Sunday Night Football, September 24th, 8:20 Eastern against the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's going to be a nice classic barn burner game, but I'm going with the Steelers. They're at the Chargers, 4:05 p.m. Eastern on October 1st, week 4. I'm going to take the Chargers for that one. So that would put the Raiders at 2-2. And Green Bay, they're home against Green Bay October 9th, week 5, Monday Night Football. I'm going to take the Green Bay Packers because I feel like Jordan Love is going to show us that he can play. He's going to show us that he can play. So that wraps up all the week 1 action, everything from the devastating Aaron Rodgers injury to everything that we saw throughout the course of week 1. Like I said, we're going to find out if these teams are good. We're going to find out if these teams are bad. We're going to find out if these teams are just in between. It's just kind of how sports goes. So this is what we're going to do. I'm going to wrap things up here for tonight. On Thursday is my next broadcast. I will be on 6:30 Eastern time. I had a little bit of technical difficulty, so I apologize for the tardiness, but 6:30 Eastern time here Thursday. We're going to talk about the Thursday night football game. That's the Minnesota Vikings and Philadelphia Eagles. We're going to get into that more, kind of preview things for how Sunday week 2 is going to look. And then I'm going to incorporate some other sports. All we've talked about is football. I've noticed these 2 episodes, but at the same time, that's kind of all we had. So we're going to talk some more sports. Again, I'm not biased towards what I talk about, and I'm definitely going to kind of incorporate other sports as the season goes on and as we get more things going again here. I appreciate you guys joining me for episode 2 of the Hype Show. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe on this video. I definitely do appreciate it very much here. Again, I'm going to go ahead and close things out here on the Hype Show. Again, Thursday evening, 6:30 Eastern time here. I'll be back on to discuss things more with you guys, kind of preview the Thursday night game, and we're going to get into more sports, like I said here. Thank you guys so much here for joining me again here. And this is The Hype Show. Thank you so much. You have a good night. Appreciate it. Thank you.